Do you dull, distract, or disassociate? If you think you do, stay tuned for today's live because self-abandonment is the real deal. So my name is Mike and I help people navigate their self-love journey so we can all create loving relationships with ourselves and with others. How's everyone doing out there? I hope you can hear me fine. Hey Paul, how you doing? I hope everything's good. The lighting's good. We're going through a pretty nasty tropical storm here down in Costa Rica. So we're working through it. We're working through it. So the purpose of this work, this journey that we're all on, is to move away and disconnect from both our conscious and unconscious survival strategies and stepping into this divinity. It's about coming home to who we are and our power, our infinite wisdom, so we feel safe enough so that we feel our support, our own support and expansion and self-actualization. So I'm very grateful to be able to do this kind of work. So thank you very much for being here this morning with me. I'm so honored to be able to facilitate this work, and it's such a pivotal time in history to be able to do that. So I want to thank everyone for being here, and I want to set some agreements before we kind of start. As we're going through this transformational work, and as I say a few things today, I want to set a policy in this container of safety, to be able to say that there's no shame, there's no guilt, and no self-punishment as we're going through this live in this container. It's not an invitation to should all over ourselves. So we were going to have none of that. Okay. So what is up with self-abandonment? As I make myself a little bit comfortable here, I'll admit I'm a recovering self-abandoner. For most of my adult life, I've been a rescue, people-pleasing, high-performing perfectionist who basically didn't know how to say no to anything or anyone, especially in relationships. And we are all guilty of that. So how have you self-abandoned in the past? And so for a lot of us, that's really a tricky question because we don't actually see it. We don't see it happening. Hey, Uday, what's up? And so how are the major ways in which we self-abandon and why? So the moment that we make someone else responsible for our feelings and our sense of self-worth is where we actually begin to self-abandon. The moment that we put our value in the hands of something or someone outside of us. For example, if we only value ourselves when we have external evidence of it. So like people or circumstances are like a proof, that we are, we need that external proof of that. It's like being in a relationship or getting a promotion, so if you need like that promotion to really receive that outside or that external acknowledgement. So self-abandonment really is when we ignore and suppress our own values, our own commitments, our divine truth, in order to feel this need, like this heavy need to feel safe and secure. And so why do we do that? Why do we need to feel this safe and secure? Well, we get a lot of this from when we were children. We needed to receive love and worthiness at that level. So we needed to learn how to behave, how to be a good girl or a good boy. So we learned that behavior very early in our existence. And so what we do is we carry these into adulthood. And most of the time, they don't work. So it can actually be extremely, extremely exhausting. So what are some of the primary ways in which we do that? So there is emotional self-abandonment, and then there's spiritual self-abandonment. And so what we do is we judge ourselves rather than accept ourselves. It's very common. We just have to listen to that internal language. We ignore our feelings by staying up in our head rather than bringing ourselves down and staying in present to our body and to our heart. Especially when painful feelings come up of loneliness, heartache, heartbreak, grief, during any emotional time, especially during breakup or loss of a loved one, right? So what we do is we turn into various addictions to numb anxiety, depression, shame, guilt, and anger. And what it does is it actually causes us to judge ourselves and ignore our own feelings. So these are all even forms of self-sabotage, right? So we kind of suppress our feelings. So the other ways is when we make our partner our only dependable source of love rather than sourcing that inward. So instead of sourcing it externally, we want it to be inward into our spiritual and self-love practices. And so what it does is it actually puts an unfair burden on our partner to be able to give that to ourselves. It's very unfair. Specifically, in relational self-abandonment, that's what we do. So if this resonates with anyone, absolutely. I've been through that, and I know a lot of people have gone through that. It's very common. So I'd like to dive in a little bit deeper into emotional self-abandonment as I drink a little bit of water here. Once we emotionally abandon ourselves and make others responsible for our feelings, then we often feel this need to try to control them, to get them to love us and to make us feel worthy, We are controlled by anger and blame and criticism, compliance, or we withdraw, which actually creates a lot of conflict in relationships, right? We go through these different emotional states and we go through these different modes. We go through fight, flight, and freeze, and even the fourth F, which is actually fawn, where we morph and become a chameleon in the relationship. We become this shapeshifter, or become this pleaser, this relationship pleaser. Again, this is where we abandon our true, authentic self as a coping mechanism to stay secure, to self-preserve. And it's an easy way for us to be able to somehow get connection and feel a sense of belonging, which in most cases is actually very false. So I don't know if you can actually hear the rain, but it's pretty intense out there right now. So if this resonates with you at all, it's actually very, very common. We do that in such subtle ways, right? So again, where does this all come from? It's an adaptation that we've endured during early childhood environment from a lack of connectedness to a loved one on some level. I know I did with a primary caregiver that was emotionally not available for me. And so this is really our inner child that needs that safety and security in adulthood. And so, this happens in relationships because this is where we go to heal our childhood traumas, right? So let's get a little bit deeper into relational self-abandonment. So where we actually self-abandon in relationships and how it causes problems in relationships. So when we self-abandon ourselves through another, either through compliance or resistance, we create this lack of trust in ourselves that eventually leads to conflict and resentment within the relationship. This is very common. So what we'll do is we'll often refuse to speak up in relationships, and what it does is it actually eventually erodes the love and the intimacy within the relationship, right? So we become a partner pleaser to avoid conflict and seeking approval. And it's definitely a type of protective mechanism, right? So if someone else near us gets upset, we either want to fight or we want to run away or we want to disconnect, or we self-abandon. And we do that by masking. We don't say anything. And it really is just a way to be able to feel safe, which is actually in a false way of staying safe. So some of this may start to get a little bit familiar. So this is a great opportunity to practice some self-love, right? And to be able to acknowledge that you're operating from an old program. And so really one of our most important responsibilities is to take care of ourselves, to be compassionate, right? To be compassionate with ourselves and our experiences and our feelings and our needs. But yet it rarely occurs. We beat ourselves up. When safety is your highest priority and your intent is to gain control over how you're getting love instead of just as a way to be able to avoid pain, you're actually operating from this wounded inner child that's within us. Anytime your attention is in the other while ignoring yourself, that same inner child actually gets abandoned. So when you ignore your feelings and your needs, you're actually abandoning yourself. So let's sit with that for a little bit. So, you might find yourself feeling some compassion in other people's feelings and their needs as well, and abandoning your own needs as a caretaking mechanism in order to get their approval and to tend to their feelings and their needs, which is actually a form of codependency as well. So, we need to be cautious of that as well. So, you may think that your feelings of abandonment are coming from others not attending to you with love and approval. But, the feeling of abandonment is really coming from ignoring yourself and not actually honoring yourself. So, what is the downside to self-abandonment? I mean, there's quite the list. As I mentioned before, we play roles. We wear masks, and what it does is it actually gets in the way of creating true, authentic relationships. It gives birth to codependency, as I mentioned, where we actually further disconnect from ourselves. We abandon our own truth just to maintain a connection with someone, which obviously we don't want to do any of that, right? I'm sure some of this is feeling a little bit familiar, even at a small level, as a way to cope. We shut down emotionally because it's easier to adapt than to speak our truth in fear of rejection. So really, this is an opportunity to ask yourself, how do I act so they feel okay? Do I quiet down? You get into this state of increased alertness as well. So, we're extremely sensitive to our surroundings. It can make you feel like you're in this in this kind of alert mode where your nervous system is very alert. And so we're actually giving our power away to other people and the environment. It really breaks a sense of trust with others. So you don't allow others to get too close. You want to be adored, you want to be loved, but your nervous system from old trauma says, oh, no, I was abandoned before, so now there's this back and forth. You question your own roles in your life, that you've built up over the years. And you can ask questions like yourself, who am I without this perfectionism? Who am I when I'm not controlling? Who am I without these survival mechanisms? Survival mechanisms just so that we can survive as opposed to thriving. And the reality is we can't live in this reality our entire lives. this is the invitation for us to realize that when we are truly compassionate toward ourselves, we no longer need to seek approval and attention from others outside of us. When we're able to have compassion for our own sadness and our own sorrow and our own grief and helplessness at times, so that our inner child feels this love, it's really seen as a way to give this child the acknowledgement and value that it needs, not something we need to feel this need to get from the outside. We can cultivate our own safety and security without external validation. This safety and worthiness coming from the inside. So really this journey is about building and reinforcing the trust within ourselves, and it takes time. It's a process. It's slow, it's sustainable, and the fast and furious is definitely not the way to approach it. So if any of this really resonates with you, let me know. Send me a message or add a comment below. And I think it's super, super important for us to be able to get to a point where we can begin this self-love journey. And so self-abandonment is something that happens to us throughout this journey, and you experience this through all the examples that I've said earlier in this live. And so to start the self-love journey really is the ability for us to be able to connect to who we are. And one of the ways to do that is to connect to what we value. And a lot of us are operating in cruise control. We actually don't understand exactly what it is that we value. And what I've actually done is I've created a values workbook. It took me several hours to create this workbook. And what it is it's a workbook. It's a personal values workbook. And what it is, it's a way for us to be able to begin the self-love journey. It's a way for us to realize what it is that we value in our life. What is important to us. It's really, values are kind of your North Star. They're your beacon. They're your way that you live your life. It's like a blueprint of how you want to live your life and in relationships. And a lot of the times, we self-abandon in relationships because we don't understand what we value to begin with. So we are operating on cruise control, right? We get into relationships, and when certain values are crossed, we don't even realize it because we've never actually done anything to realize, to understand what our values are and what's important to us. So this personal values workbook is available on my website. You can get it for absolutely free. So if you go to www.mikefinelli.com, and right on the main page there is a free values workbook. I urge you to download that to start the self-love journey. And even if you've been along this path for a little while and you're just looking to be able to reconnect and understand what your values are, I absolutely urge you to download this workbook. You'll be amazed on, a lot of people that have, dozens and dozens of people have downloaded this workbook, and you'd be amazed how valuable understanding your values can be on this journey. So again, I appreciate everybody's time. Again, I'm so grateful, and it's such a pleasure to be able to do this work, especially in this day and age. And it's so important for us to remain connected to ourselves. And I'm very grateful, and let's do this again real soon. Thanks again, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Have a awesome rest of the day.